believe that Mr. Nader has introduced figures, analysis, and some suggestions as well.
Forgive me, Your Excellency, I say somebody who's tended over the last few decades to talk more to those who are out of power than those who are in power in the Gulf, for which I make no apology. I'd like to address this question of the coming tornado, as you put it. I think there are two reasons why oil companies and governments are seeking to diversify away from the Gulf as far as they can. One is the reason which I think concerns us all, which was discussed yesterday, which is the continued instability in relations between states. In essence, the inability of the three key countries, Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, to come up with a reasonable security arrangement between them, and that looks a very long way away indeed, and for that reason, many fear there will be further conflicts in which the management of oil may not be that easy. But there is a second reason, which is the question of instability within countries. I think you said that these requests for human rights and so forth were alien views being imposed. But there is, as you know, another reading, which is that the governments in these countries are not listening to their own peoples. We saw what happened in Iran, and the Iranians and the rest of the world is still, I think, reaping the consequences of that. But I have to say that the progress made by those in power in the Gulf, and in particular in GCC countries, is judged by many people, including people in those countries, to be unduly slow. I meet regularly in London with, for example, the opposition from Bahrain, the Al-Jamdis, the Shahawis and others. I think they are reasonable people who have reasonable constitutional requests. If they're not listened to, the crazies will take over. You have a situation in other countries in which the press is tightly controlled, with the absurd situation where the novels of the prominent Gulf ambassador are published here and are banned in his own country. Surely the deepest problem about long-term stability in the Gulf, and the reason why people are worried about relying on its future oil output, is the fear that the elites in those countries are simply not taking adequate and timely measures to share power and wealth with their own peoples. I realize this is not the view held by most people in the room, but I think the example of Iran does suggest that there may be something to it. Thank you.
Well, there is partially some truth in what you said, that probably in social and political areas we're much slower than many other regions. But the question which I raised when I said the attempt on the part of the West to diversify the sources of supply, by going to the West, to the Soviet Union, for example, or Latin America, should not be as comforting as you think it should be. The Soviet Union, the Communist Party in the Soviet Union, even under the current democracy, has the majority and it could accept scale any time, and then we will come back to this. So, point number one. Point number two, I must say some of the problems that we have in the area are caused by, the reception to the Iranian Revolution, for example, in the early stages. And your whole relationship with the Shah before that was caused of the Iranian Revolution. And it is much better, like some people suggested yesterday, I think my friend Sheikh Abdurrahman suggested yesterday, that you should be helping those areas into political and social problems than just simply emphasizing the commercial relationship, which seems to the people of the area to be your primary goal.
David?
David Mellor, Excellency, thank you very much for your speech, which was extremely carefully researched and gave us a lot of facts about the oil economy. I'm sure a lot of us wouldn't be able to recall such a see. And secondly, thank you for giving us such a frank assessment of the opinions of a number of people in the Gulf, quite a lot of people in the West are mystified as to why there are plenty of people in the Gulf who have everything to lose if Saddam Hussein goes on the rampage. You don't understand the reluctance to see UN resolutions carried through. And I think your candid words about how some UN resolutions are regarded more highly than others, it is something that at some point the West will have to come to terms with. Also, I wanted to ask you about infrastructure development in the Gulf, and I think your point was well made, Fred Halliday, that it was the naivete of people in the West giving refuge to those who took over Iran in the belief that they would run a better show than the Shah. There's actually caused a huge amount of trouble and instability in the Gulf. And there are plenty of people lurking around in London who, however moderately they may put forward their opinions, such as Fred Halliday, it would be only a fool who would actually trust them. But there we are. The point I really wanted to ask you was, we have a situation in the Gulf, do we not, where huge leaps forward have been made in infrastructural developments, and most of us who visit the Gulf marvel at the way in which over 20 or 30 years infrastructure has developed. But the real challenge, of course, is going to be finding work for the young, educated, fast-growing population to do. Could you expand a little on how far you think that the policies and strategies of governments in the Gulf are doing enough to diversify the economy, and in particular to move into secondary and tertiary forms of industrial and commercial development? Because the danger, obviously, as we look at threats to stability, is the obvious instability when able people within any society don't find work fulfilling for their talents. You know, the devil makes work, we say, for idle hands to do. I'm sure there must be some Islamic equivalent of that proverb.
Well, I'll give you a glimpse of my personal experience when I was running the Ministry of Planning or the Ministry of Petroleum. We used to get a student graduate from some of the best universities who would come to me in my office and set his own conditions for the project. And we used to acquiesce to those conditions simply because we needed him. After a while, with more than him out of school, it wasn't that big a division between his power and mine. And then they would accept employment mainly in the major cities, like Jeddah or Riyadh. That's where his family is. Then, at a later date, people now in Saudi Arabia, young men in Saudi Arabia who come out of universities would accept work anywhere. A country that has about 4 or 5 million expatriates wouldn't necessarily fall in the category of countries which should have unemployment. The question I think that we need to address now, and I think it's being addressed now, I have just attended an education conference in Abha, where every speaker was speaking about the need to revisit our educational policy and make sure that we put emphasis on the disciplines that are needed for employment. And this, I think, even though it's a long-term policy direction, it is needed now, and I think we can live a little bit with unemployment for a while until we proceed with that policy.
Dr. Douglas?
Thank you very much for that presentation. And actually, what I would like to hear your opinions regarding is the Gulf producers' attempts at actually going downstream. How serious do you see these attempts, and what are the main obstacles that you see? Is it really one of the channels that we can diversify basically our economies with regard to oil?
Well, you know, it is one of the pain points I suggested that Gulf countries pursue, and we in Saudi Arabia did it in the past 10 years, and we've been quite successful. And the reason was not so much making money out of refining, because there is more money in distribution than there is in refining, but buying assets would lock up the market for your oil production. What is happening right now is that there is a glut in the market, which means what? People are competing, companies are competing for marketplace share. If you lock up the asset, like for example, in Saudi Arabia, we have 600,000 barrels a day locked up in the eastern states of the United States, because we own 3 refineries and distribution facilities there. We have another about 450,000 barrels locked up in South Korea. As a matter of fact, we supplied South Korea with 30% of its consumption. We did the same thing with the Philippines, and we did the same thing in Greece recently with about 150,000 barrels a day. All in all, Saudi Arabia now has a captive market of about 1 million barrels a day of oil. And this is one way of trying to reduce competing with others in the market and concentrate on the other areas.
But what are some of the obstacles that you see?
Well,
The obstacles, especially in terms of getting into the retail business, for example.
let me tell you again our experience. It's better to get into negotiations with those companies when they are in trouble. So they will be more susceptible to listening. We got into a joint venture with Texaco when Texaco was having this problem with Benzema, and we bought 50% of their assets in the United States. I think others, you select also Western companies which need secure supplies, because this is, like I mentioned, energy security is reciprocal. I need the market, they need the supplies. And this can measure together in a very beautiful system. Some of those companies really compete for supplies also. And if I secure supplies for them while they secure the market for me, it's a joint effort. Generally speaking, I would say that most countries of the West have accepted the idea, and they find it useful for both sides. Some of them insist on having concession facilities in the Gulf areas before they accept joint ventures in marketing and distribution. And this has been quite an impediment to the facilitation of this type of policy.
Mike Alexander. Over the next 5 to 10 years, assuming the pipelines and other facilities get built, the Caspian Basin is going to emerge, or is very likely to emerge, as a major new or revived source of energy for world markets. Assuming that happens, are the Gulf countries going to regard the Caspian countries as, so to speak, natural partners, or are they going to regard them as somebody who is perhaps likely to dilute the influence of the Gulf countries? And more specifically, in regard to Iran, which I think at one point in your remarks you referred to as a natural Gulf country, are they more likely to see the Caspian countries as their natural partners, or the Gulf countries as their natural partners?
About 3 million barrels a day. So to come in the market would not be different from what we are doing today. We're assuming also that under current systems there would be economic growth in the ex-Soviet Union, where more domestic consumption will ensue and therefore reduce their ability to export. But the Gulf countries, especially the private sector, is jumping into that area just like everybody else. And we have Saudi companies, Omani companies, and other private sector companies who are doing work in that area. So there would be, I think, in a sense, partners and in a sense, competitors.
And Iran?
Oh, Iran too?
No, sorry, I mean, what you say is completely right about the private sector, but of course governments are also involved. I just wonder whether you think Iran, looking forward over 5 to 10 years, is more likely to see itself, as a major player in the Gulf or as a major player in the Caspian, or whether this is just a false dichotomy. Which
I think it's a false dichotomy.
Your extensive in oil, what about water? I mean, in the past has caused disposition of populations migrations, it's causing problems to our west, north. Do you think it's a potential crisis and how we should go about it?
Water? Yes, I think it will. And we're getting more into desalination, which is expensive. We have succeeded in reducing the cost of producing desalted water by assuming dual production of both power and water. But still, even that if used for domestic purposes, it will be difficult to use in agriculture. And this is an area where we will have a problem.
I wonder if I could just go back to the point raised by Fred Halliday, this question of oil wealth and its relation to political participation. It's more perhaps a comment than a question. I think Fred comes in an honourable tradition of British academics who support the underdog. And I remember clearly his writings in favour of the communist regime in Yemen in the early 70s. It is more a comment.
I didn't set out to sit down.
I agree with David that to regard the moderates in the opposition of Bahrain as people of goodwill seeking only moderate political participation is both foolish and slightly naive, especially in view of the mayhem created on the streets of Bahrain by their supporters. I think, if I could say a couple of points here. First of all, Gulf leaders do listen, and that was a very striking feature of the latest Iraqi crisis, when my own view is it was the feeling on the streets in the Gulf that had a major impact on the attitudes and policies of the Gulf regimes. I'd make 2 points, I think, in relation to what Fred said. Firstly, I think it would be foolish in the West to try to imply that we can impose a sort of UK parliamentary-style democracy on a culture and a form of leadership which is quite different. I think that the Gulf states have made amazing strides, miraculous strides really, in the way they have managed this massive change from Bedouin and fishing communities to quite extraordinary wealth, largely for the benefit of their own people. And they will introduce participation in their own style and in their own time, in a form of evolution rather than revolution if the dissidents are given undue encouragement. I would also say that you judge the success of this by the quality of life of the people living in the Gulf. And if you ask them, not many I suspect would say they prefer to be living in Tehran than in Abu Dhabi or Bahrain. This is very much a point which will come up next time, and I think we welcome here the kind of discussion which Fred has generated, and I suspect this will appear more under threat assessment. But Excellency, if you had any points to make about it, I think we'd welcome a chance to hear them.
I would just say that while I'm speaking in an individual capacity, I did talk to Foreign Secretary last night, and I said, well, what have you been discussing at your other conference? And he said, and I quote, we had a very good discussion on human rights and progress of democracy, and I hope things go further. So I don't think that it's purely an individual view that I'm expressing. Thank you.
Well, I think probably only appropriate for me to respond to that, but in response to this question, it seems to remind me of the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. One of the porridges is too cold, one is too warm, one is just right, and one is too hot. Some people might prefer it a bit colder, some people might prefer it a bit hotter, and we like to think that we are staying the course and developing slowly, some may feel, and too fast, others may feel. But ever since the 1970s, there has been a continuous role for the development of the political process, and we're not ashamed to admit that. Now, as far as the meetings of the foreign ministers yesterday, what I heard from Mr. Robin Cook was that he was very pleased with the process of development in Bahrain especially. And he actually was surprised by how the view that he had before he took power had been changed by his experience when he had visited the region recently. So I think there are some issues that we have differences with the UK government, but it is nowhere near the chasm or the gap that maybe Mr. Halliday perceives it to be. Now, Mr. Halliday is entitled to his own opinion, and I respect that. And, we can only hope that with security and stability, it will be a benefit for both our peoples in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Maybe, let me, because I didn't think I would raise the question of human rights and stability in an oil discussion. I said to my friends, some of those I was talking to last night, that for some reason in the Gulf, we start out with a seminar on the environment, and then it turns out to be an oil seminar. And then we start a seminar on security, and it turns out to be an oil seminar. This is the first time we start as an oil seminar. Let me say this. Nobody, I think, in the Gulf is against human rights. There is a minimum standard of human interaction that we all believe in, all civilized people believe in all over the world. We disagree on definitions. In fact, there hasn't been an agreement on definitions on human rights in the Western world. Take, for example, the issue of capital punishment. People disagree on the issue of capital punishment. At the end of the day, even some of those countries and some of the states in the United States who have practiced for no capital punishment for a while are reverting back to the issue. Concepts on human rights change. Let me tell you something else. Part of human rights, of course, is religious freedom. And I sit down with somebody from you here in the United Kingdom, and both of us agree that there should be freedom of religion. And after we agree on that one, I say, okay, my religion approves capital punishment. Then you come and say, no, you can't have capital punishment because it is inhuman. So here, partly we agree on religious freedom, and then we disagree on the components of religious freedom. And you can take that to mean everything. What we're trying to say, that we should all apply the minimum standards of human rights, but not necessarily use.
Okay, David, do I understand that you would like to comment?
Well, I tried to have a second bite from Sherry, but I kind of think it was very stylish the way Fred Halliday got Robin Cook in with that sentence that he just said. I think most of us have understood that this was a horse or a donkey that Robin had hopped off because, Disraeli once said that the opponent, he ran the risk of looking at his most ridiculous and he was trying to be most serious. I do not think it lies in the mouth of Britain to go around the world preaching to other people, particularly friendly and civilized nations in the Gulf, about human rights. We should have learned that lesson from trying to construct Western principles in Africa, which was a uniform disaster from which countries like Nigeria have never recovered. Also, it's unendearing that these points should apparently be made exclusively to Bahrain as the smallest geographic bloc. But we know full well if one or two of the larger Gulf countries were to respond in kind to Britain, then a not-so-stout party would collapse immediately. So I think we should get a lesson in this. It's not British foreign policy in its finest, in my judgment.
Fred, this is the final.
Yeah, that's it. On the question of are these Western values or others, we can spend the whole night here, but I particularly like the words in the Quran, like there is freedom of expression in all religions. There is no incompatibility between basic views of human rights as evolved in one part of the world and Islamic tradition. The Muslim empires have been more tolerant than many others, and we need hardly remind ourselves that the greatest human rights violation of the 20th century did not take place in the Muslim world. Moreover, the point that His Excellency made about the relative tolerance and practice of human rights in the Gulf is one I entirely agree with. And it is for that very reason that people like myself, who may have been critical or nuisance on and other issues, strongly and staunchly supported and support Kuwait against Saddam Hussein. And may I say, in my own academic life, one of my proudest moments was to invite our current chairman, Mohammed al-Ramegi, in October 1990 to come to speak to an audience of 300 students who had never seen Kuwait, he'd never seen anybody from the Gulf, had all sorts of prejudices. Mohammed just came forward and said, I am like you, I'm an academic, I'm a writer, my country's been invaded, I don't know where my family is, and we need your support. And in that simple speech, he won the ground. And he showed what the good traditions of the Gulf are, which is why the Gulf, from all sorts of different political and professional backgrounds in this country, has strong support, and I think that's why we're all here today. Thank you.